Hi class, it's Bill back with our follow-up on serialization. We started talking about what serialization is all about, and we did some starter topics on it, and that was what's it about, how does it work, how do you get its, what kinds of things do you have to do to mark a particular class as serializable, etc. And then we started in on serializing. We actually did some coding to prove that that works, and we did that all in main, and you can see that here last time. That should be familiar to you by now. So now what we want to do is work on the opposite thing, which was we want to deserialize the data. So I'm going to start down here, I'm going to come down a little, and I'm going to say we are deserializing. Right? Deserialization. Now, one of the things that we're going to do, because we don't want to fool ourselves that we've done something that we then haven't really done, I just want to zap the array. I just want to say college people equals new person 0. Right? I'm going to make this array point to a newly created array of person objects that is 0 long. So in essence, I've just zapped that array, right? Nothing can be left. If we printed that, we would see, yep, nothing left. There's nothing in that array. So we don't want to fool ourselves and think that we have done it when we haven't done it. So we are going to now, right, we're going to mark these things so we can see on the output that something's happened. So how do we do this in the opposite way, right? Well, again, it seems very, very familiar in terms of the pattern. You're going to create a file input stream. It looks a lot like a file. You're going to pass it a string representing the file name. Then you're going to pass that as a parameter to the object input stream, right? And that thing is going to do the actual work of inputting the data, and you're going to use its read object method, and you're going to cast the result. We're going to talk about that in a minute, and then you're going to close those things, right? It's pretty straightforward. So let's go back to our code and let's see how that's going to work. All right, so very similar to what we did before, we are going to create a file input stream. We know, of course, that that's going to complain in a minute, so we might as well go grab this stuff and paste it in, right? So we're going to create a file input stream, and I'm going to call it the people file, right? And I'm going to make a new one of those things, and it's people.ser. Okay, same file. This time we're going to be reading it. Now, of course, it's going to say you have to declare or throw blah, 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 blah. So, of course, I'm going to go take care of that real quick, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've added a try-catch real quick. Nothing too exciting there, right? It just needs you to find that thing. And so I put a print message that says, hey, we didn't find the file, because if you have a file not found exception, that means it didn't find the file, right? So that's pretty clear. Okay, so now we've created the file input stream. What else do we need to create? We need to create the object input stream. And it's going to be, I'm going to call it in equals new object input stream, and I'm going to pass it the people file. Okay, now of course it has its own thing which says, hey, you got to bring me in, you got to import me. So I'm going to go grab that. You get to watch me type, isn't that exciting? And then it says, hey, you've got to catch an IO exception, right? Because something else could have happened there. Well, this time I'm going to catch it a different way, just to show you that you can do this. You can catch an IO exception, and then E, remember E is just the variable to hold the exception in case you want to print something. And then my message here is going to be something just like, hey, I don't know, something failed, something bad happened, right? Okay, so far so good. We have created our two objects that are related to getting that stuff in, and now we can try to read the thing. So we're going to call in.readObject. Right, in.readObject. Now what are we going to assign it to? That's going to read an object. It's going to go to the file and it's going to read the object that it finds there, right? The first object that it finds, which it understands, right? The file format understands, like, okay, I've got my objects written. It's going to just go over there and grab something, right? Now the question is, can I do this? Right, and you should know pretty quickly that that is not going to be sufficient. Why? Well, first, it says Java is strongly typed. The thing that comes in here is an object. The thing that needs to get assigned here is an array of persons, right? That's not the same thing. It can't guarantee that what it's reading is one of those things. All that in knows is it's reading an object. So what do you have to do with that? You have to cast, right? And that is not the cast that you want because you're not returning a person, you're actually returning a person array, right? You're returning a person array. All right, now before I handle the error that's here, I'm just going to take care of my bookkeeping. I'm going to make sure in reverse order I close up my stuff, right? Good housekeeping there. Now, it's going to say there could be a class not found exception. Now, class not found exception, we are going to talk a little bit about that, but what can happen here is that it can decide that it can't read the thing for some reason, that there is a problem in matching up the files, right? It has to match up the object that it's read with the object that you're storing, right? With the person objects that you're dealing with. And if there has been any kind of issue in getting all of that matched up, then it's going to throw this other error. And so we will paste this one in. I can just go grab that, and I'm going to put that here, all right? And I'm just going to say class not found exception, and then this is possibly a version problem. We'll talk about versioning in a minute. But what happens over time is that you can get your file formats out of sync. You wrote this stuff today, and then in a year, 2 years, you've changed your software, and somehow the way that the objects are in memory don't match up, and it can't figure out how to put the stuff back for you. So if that's the case, that's the most typical reason you're going to get this class not found exception. It's not that the class doesn't exist, it's that the class has changed in a way that it cannot figure out what to do with it. Okay, so we're going to compile that. Everything seems happy. And then just for fun, why don't we go print out the stuff just so we can make absolutely sure that we have what we expected, right? And I'm going to just, well, I have a display people method. It's probably not necessary, but I'll just go throw it in here so you can see it. Okay. All right, so this is just going to make a loop and go display them, right? So just so we can make sure that everything has come back. So let's compile that. Let's go back to our project manager view. Let's go to main. Let's run main. Right? And wait a minute, let's see what happened. Serialization started, serialization ended, deserialization started, deserialization ended. I wasn't very good about putting new lines in there. And then here's the array contents. Whoa, all of those things are back. They look just like they did up there, even the nulls, right? Even the 2 students that were null, that if we had looked, there were 3 students in a 5 student, there were 3 people in a 5 person array, and those are even back. Every bloody thing came back. How easy was that, right? So instead of futzing with, what data goes where, does it have to be labeled, what goes on what lines, we didn't have to worry about any of it. We literally dumped it, right? By simply writing the entire thing, right? By writing the array and reading the array, we dumped and reloaded the whole thing. That is amazing. If you're not amazed, then I don't know what, right? You should be amazed at that because I think it's pretty darn cool. All right, so that is something remarkable, and it's very useful when we just don't want to deal with files, right? We want to just get on with our work and dump the data and then come back and get it back if we need it at a later time. So that's pretty amazing. Okay. Now there are a couple follow-on little topics that certainly we need to look at. We've been talking about versioning, but we haven't really dealt with it yet. So the thing, as I was mentioning, is that your code changes over time. Often it gets more complex, right? You add new features to the file format, but still you've got these old files hanging around. Now you can certainly write conversion stuff, right? Where you go and you figure out that, hey, the users need to upgrade, so you're going to go and search for all of their files and you can upgrade them. But that can be kind of tricky too. Sometimes you just want to be able to read the old files. The way that you can do that, or the way that Java knows about that, is it actually calculates from the file, right? It knows the serial version ID of your objects as they sit in your files, right? It looks at that and calculates that, whatever that is, this UID, and then it looks to what you read from the file and what you have in your current object and makes sure that those things match. And if they don't match, you're going to get this invalid class exception, right? Or in our case, did we put that one? That was that class not found exception, right? So you can certainly find, you can get that particular problem here, right? So you definitely want to think about that, and one way that you can do it is you can go use this tool called serialver.exe, and you can actually go figure out using, let's say, our person class, what is the serialization version of this particular file at this moment. And then you can add that to your file, right, to your person class. You can go add that whole thing, right? So you figure it out and you go add it in there in person, right? So it might look like something like this. At one point I actually went and calculated that, and in person then somewhere up at the top I put this thing, right? So that's my serial version ID, and that was calculated using serialver. Now you don't, to make this actually work, you don't actually have to do this at all. You can just make it up, right? You can just say whatever, right? 42 long. So you can sort of do whatever you want to do there, but if you really want to say, hey, I'm going to go and calculate the real thing, you use that serialver tool and you run it. Notice you run it on the class name, not the file name, so you just say person. But that will go and actually put that thing in, right? And again, it's going to throw an invalid class exception if those two things are different. So that is actually another one that we need to add to our checking. Now, if you make certain kinds of changes to your classes, this stuff will still work. So in your person class or your student class or your teacher class, if you add new instance variables, that's okay. They're just not going to get written, right? It's going to match them up correctly, but it can't match up new ones. You can change static to non-static to instance. That works. You can add classes to the object hierarchy as long as it doesn't affect the relationships here. That won't be a problem. That's all compatible. But non-compatible changes, if you were to delete one of the fields, so if it reads data and then tries to find a corresponding field and can't, that's a problem. If you change data types, that's a problem. And if you change the class hierarchy in which this particular thing lives, right, you're changing the relationships, that's a problem. So you can actually look at the red object and then pass it to this thing and do actually a lookup of the serial ID, right? So you can actually do that if you want to that way as well, right? For a red object, something that you go read out of the file. So that is a way that you can deal with the versioning. So in our file, as I said, what we might do is something like this. And if you want to practice with this, you can go change one of these guys, right? We can go add another string, private int age. I don't know, we don't have to actually do anything with it, we just have to have it, right? And then we can go and see if, not writing the thing anymore, but just reading it. So maybe I'll go back to my project view, maybe I'll open main, right? And rather than serializing, I'm just going to comment that stuff out, right? I'm just going to take all this stuff and go boom, 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 right? So let me just comment this out briefly. Let's go back to compile that, and let's go run it, and let's see if everything comes back in, right? Everything came in just fine, right? So that was a compatible change that we made, and everything's cool. Now, if I don't have this versioning, if I don't put some sort of version ID up here, that will throw that error, right? That will throw that extra error that we talk about here that was discussed at this point, the invalid class exception, which we may want to also catch, right? So by putting this in there, we made it to where it would not throw that particular error, because it says if you have this version UID in here, you must know what you're doing. You're trying to be compatible, you know what's going on, so I'm going to let you slide, right? I'm going to let you slide. And then the only problem will happen if you don't if you have incompatible changes, that's a different problem. That's going to give a different issue, as we talked about that other error. All right, so this is not everything in the world that you might want to know about serialization, but hopefully it's a good starter point for you, enough to get you going and to use it in your projects. There are a whole bunch of references here that I'll leave. If you want to pause, you can copy those down, take a screenshot. So Cool stuff, interesting stuff, and I think a very useful tool to know about. Again, it lets us work on more complex projects without working on more complex file formats and spending a whole bunch of time on silliness that we wish we didn't have to worry about. So good stuff for that. Thanks for watching these videos. I hope you're finding them useful. Leave comments if you like. And I will be back with another video. We will look quickly at Java collections and lists. We will start talking about array lists and what the magic is behind those before we demystify them. So we've got a lot of good stuff coming up in days in the next week or so. So come back and watch another video. I hope. See you then. Bye.